she didn't really feel much different. She began to babysit occasionally, though found few willing to put their children in the hands, literally or figuratively, of a slightly small 13-year-old. And now she grew some more. She went to a different school for high school, and she was around a lot of new people, but she still didn't feel that much different. She began to become more involved in school, perhaps even more so than she had been in her old school. She began to be a little less shy around these new people, and they began to seem less new. She turned 16, and she found that some people were calling her more often to babysit for them. But the girl liked this because she enjoyed working and liked her. And now, when she started her third year of high school, one of the other girls in her class described her job. It was a few hours a week, 2 or 3 times a day, and some Saturdays. And this interested the girl very much. So she asked if there was another opening, and the next day the other girl said they were looking for one more person. So the girl went in that afternoon, filled out an application, and the people were very nice. And she started working the next day. The girl realized later that she was very fortunate to have such a pleasant first work experience. And she also realized that somewhere along the line she'd stopped being exactly a girl. She was now a young woman who was confident and self-assured. And she liked that. She was now in the broad and somewhat vague category of teenagers. Now, teenager is an interesting term in and of itself. Simply put, it refers to those between the ages of 13 and 19, simply because those are the words that end in teen. But there's a lot more to being a teenager than that. A teenager is one who seems to be no longer exactly a child, but not yet an adult. They usually live with their parents, or are at least financially dependent on them, meaning the parents pay for at least some of the basic needs of food, shelter, and clothing. And though if they're 18 and 19, they are legally considered adults. For the purposes of my paper, it depends more on their level of. And we know that there hasn't always been this term, teenager. Social structure has changed quite a bit over the years, and even changes noticeably from generation to generation. Over the last few generations, this period has undoubtedly lengthened, but the roots of it are really quite old. Even centuries ago, more so with boys, you would see this intermediate period between being a child and being an adult. I say more so with boys because they were the ones who would later be seen to take care of themselves and their family, whereas a girl might have been married off at 12 or 13 or so. There's not much room for teenage years. But a boy would, if he wanted to become a knight, he would first become a squire. Or if he wanted to be some sort of craftsman, like a carpenter or shoemaker, he would become an apprentice to a master craftsman. And so really, though of course it has changed, this idea of a teenage period has been around for quite a long time. It's simply the idea of an intermediate period between being a child and being an adult. And as I've said, it's undeniably lengthened. And this may or may not be a good thing, but it's undeniably present. And to some degree, the law actually dictates the need for this intermediate period, because it says that while a child is under 18, they're a minor, so legally under the authority of their parents. Though, and that's true, though it would be silly to put a 5-year-old in completely the same category as a 15-year-old. While a 15-year-old is no longer expected to provide for his family, he can be expected to fix himself a sandwich every once in a while, something like that. And the goal of this teenage period is to become an adult, which is the next stage. And the teenager does this, proving themselves by working hard. They start at a lot of different things. There's schoolwork, for instance, and schoolwork is very important. It can help you get into a good college and then hopefully later get into a good career. And it's very important and just part of growing up. And there's extracurriculars as well. This can be affiliated with school, or it can be a separate lesson like violin or dance, singing. And these such things, you can learn valuable skills. If you're on a team, you can learn social skills, which are valuable and sometimes harder to develop versus people. And also another lesson like dance or music, even if you don't use that later in life, it can help you just to get a broader understanding of culture and the world around you. And then there are also chores, which are, tasks done around the house that can help you gain independence, like doing your own laundry instead of relying on your parents to do it, usually your mom. Just realizing that you have to take some responsibility and that mom won't always be there to make sure that the check you got from babysitting or the phone doesn't go through the washing machine. And you gather this experience, and also it helps you contribute to something, the family. And then with teenagers, you also have the opportunity, if you choose to, get a regular job. This is something that would be outside of your household usually, not just simple chores. I do include babysitting and such jobs in this category, especially if they're done on a regular basis. And getting a regular job can have such advantages of learning new skills and looking excellent on a resume, so therefore helping you get future jobs. And it can also give you some experience with basic finance, which many people, in my opinion, never develop. My dad's an accountant, so I care a little bit about that. And as well as, and such a job can be done on weekends or after school or during the summer. It doesn't have to be a huge time commitment, but I feel that it's an important step. And all of these, and I put volunteer work, whether it be an unpaid internship or community service, in this category as well, because I feel that it's just as important in teaching these similar things, though it doesn't have the benefit of teaching the teenager how to manage money. And all of these types of work can be very important and help the young person develop, but most of them can be done long before the teenage years. Schoolwork typically starts with learning your colors and numbers and letters, something that we hope is achieved by age 4 or so. And simple tasks, chores, such as cleaning your own room, washing your own plate, can be given out at about that same time as well. Likewise, extracurriculars like little team sports or little violin lessons, little piano lessons, they can usually start at elementary or even sooner. So if anything, these categories of work seem to differentiate toddlers from children rather than children from adults. Getting a regular job, on the other hand, is something that can almost always only be done for the first time in the teenage years. So that's something different. And certainly, getting a job can teach you new things, and it's a new experience. But people wonder, is it really worth it? In other words, should teenagers get jobs? I suggest looking at the advantages to getting a job and then looking at the reasons that many people feel that it's unnecessary or not a good idea. When you first get a job, you can learn many new things. Some are particular to the line of work that you've been doing. I've been working at Little Lamps and Ivy, which is a children's clothing store, and I've been working there since the fall. So over the past few months, I've learned quite a lot about children's clothing, particularly baby clothing. I work mostly in baby rooms. So I see a lot of pregnant women and grandmothers. And You also learn more general things, such as interacting with others, like customers and employees. If you spend any length of time in the work world, you'll have to deal with other people, obviously. Even if you're self-employed and you don't have anyone working under you, you have suppliers or customers as well. And a certain amount of finesse must be developed to keep everyone content. You must learn to be somewhat selfless in a way, not to sound too noble, but when you're a child and a child's hungry, then that's the only thing that matters to that child at the moment. However, as you get older, both in school and in work, you learn that sometimes it's not only your own needs that matter. If you really want to go have your lunch break, but the store's really busy and you can't be spared, then you just have to wait. And just little things like that, just taking initiative to do something that you wouldn't ordinarily do because you realize that no one else is going to do it if you don't. Things like that are very important. And also, getting a job can look very good on an application, whether it be to college or for your next job. And the great thing about starting work when you're a teenager, in this respect, is that even though when you first fill out a job application, it'll ask you for previous jobs, but few people actually expect a 16-year-old to have had a job before. However, the situation is completely different about 6 years later. The average employer, the 22-year-old who's been working since they were 16, looks infinitely better, all else being equal, the 22-year-old who's just got out of college and has never worked a day in his life. So it gives you some experience, and it looks good to other people. And also, in addition to this, you can get some experience handling money. You can have a budget, which is very important for later in life, and it's easier to develop such habits when you're young because you don't have to worry about paying for every little thing because your parents pay for your house, electricity, food. So it's easier to start there. And it can also give just general financial awareness that is, in my opinion, very lacking in today's society. In 2006, for the fourth time in all of recorded history, America had a negative savings rate. The time before had been the year before, and the two previous times had been 73 years earlier, during the Great Depression, when a fourth of the workforce was out of work. Now, of course, this percentage may be a bit misleading because it does take into consideration the retirees who are almost always spending far more than they're saving. But in the past, this is balanced out. However, and this brings us to another problem that I believe will come in the future. This year, in 2008, the first of the 78 million baby boomers will become eligible for early retirement from Social Security. And in 3 years, they'll be eligible for Medicare. And we all have heard a lot about our different retirement and medical options, and none of them seem quite secure enough for my safe well-being, my mental well-being. So I suggest starting young, saving early, and just being financially aware so that you can perhaps have some impact on society. And like I said, the first step to doing this is being financially responsible and aware. You can do this quite young by just being aware of your surroundings and getting a job to become part of the contributing to the problem, or contributing to the solution, not the problem. That's bad. So now we come to the reasons why some people feel that it wouldn't be a good idea for their teenagers to get a job. The most common objection, especially from parents, is that they feel that it would distract their child from their studies. We all know that we're such diligent students that we wouldn't want anything to distract us. Because nothing already does. The job leads the grades to your work. But I feel that as a whole, getting a job looks good, and you learn a lot of things, and it's very beneficial for you. And of course, schoolwork is very important. Like I said, it helps you get into college and all sorts of things. But later on, when you're 24 and applying for a job, it's not, the only things they care about isn't what your grade point average was in 10th grade or 11th grade. They seem to care about more than that. And even colleges look at other things. But, of course, if you are worried about your grades slipping, then I always advise getting a job in the summer instead. It doesn't have to be during the school year. And another less common, but still present objection might be that they don't feel that it would fit what they want to do with their lives. There's a lot of teenagers who may not know what they want to do with their lives. But if you do know what you want to do with your lives, then I advise, of course, getting a job related to that field. Like my sister, she wants to be a research chemist. So last year she worked in a lab at St. Jude and studied some cancer drug that binds something to something else, and she was not sure what she was doing exactly. But and the year before that, she worked at University of Memphis doing this like basic office work in their psychology department. And this year, she's working with her physics professor, studying the breakdown of hip replacements and the possible effects on the human body. So if you do know what you want to do, it's great to try to do something in that field. But even if you don't know what you want to do, that's no reason not to get a job, because though you should be giving some consideration to what you want to do for the rest of your life, it's generally considered common for a teenager not to. So it's not much of a problem. It's only because it's the normal thing. And so even if you don't know what you want to do, when you're a teenager, it looks good and you learn a lot of things just from having any job. And another objection under this category of it wouldn't fit in with you is that, similar to, old-fashioned girls going to college to get their MRS. They want to just get married, and that will make everything happy and won't have to work ever. But I would suggest, after cautioning them from getting married so young when they're obviously not financially set and independent, I would say that being a mother and wife probably takes more patience than just about any other career. So developing a little patience and responsibility is probably not a bad thing. And another objection might be that person wants to become a professional athlete and don't feel that they have time for other such things. I know that people are very busy. But I suggest, and of course, if you're realistically good enough to become a professional athlete and that's all you want to do, you should, of course, focus more time on that and becoming better. But I would also caution them to have a backup plan and to have a basic backup plan so that in case they do get hurt, they have something else to do. And you could even try to get some sort of job related to your sport, like coaching a lower school team or a middle school team, if the option comes. But as I've said, your first jobs don't necessarily have to be related to what you want to do for the rest of your life, especially because as a teenager, you can never be sure that that really is what you're going to do for the rest of your life in any field. And of course, the final and perhaps more more common objection among teenagers themselves is that they just don't want to get a job or don't think they have time for it. And I would say to that is that almost anyone can find time for just about anything if they want to badly enough. And if you don't want to badly enough, then I guess the best I could do would be to remind you of all the benefits and growing that you can do and you can experience in having a job. And then I'd remind you of the independence and the money. and of course the resume boosting and all of that. But of course, teenagers do deserve some time to relax, because being a teenager is a lot of work. And some types of work you get to decide to do yourself, like getting a job or being in a play, such things. And then there are some things like chores and schoolwork that you're still told to do. And so, overall, teenage years are a transition period from being a child to being an adult, from being taken care of to taking care of yourself, and even getting to show care for other people's needs as well. And of course, as you probably gathered, I was once that little girl that I began by talking about. And over the years, I became who I am today. And a large part of that was all the people around me. It was also my experiences, particularly working, whether it be babysitting or a regular job. And over the last few months, I have learned a lot of things, and not just about children's clothing or even money, though I feel that being aware of money is very important. And I've also, in the meantime, started building a work resume. So I challenge all teenagers this summer to do something different. Go out and get a job. Oh, my throat started getting dry like this, but I'm still sick with fat. I started having to swallow a lot. Yeah, my throat's still dry.
All right, questions for Catherine?
You talked a little bit about like people working in fields that they know they want to end up in, and how it's not necessarily a problem if you don't know what you want to do. You know, you can scoop ice cream even if you don't want to do that for a living. But do you think people would be better off as far as working goes if they knew more about what they want to do? Like if more people worked in fields that they were ultimately interested in, do you think that would be better?
I think that would definitely be a good idea, especially if you're kind of tentative, like, yeah, I think I might want to be a lawyer one day. Well, I advise instead of, starting to shell out all that cash to go to law school, I would certainly advise working in a law office, being one of the little lackeys for a while, see if you can tolerate it. And just, I guess the main problem is that teenagers, perhaps because they have so much freedom, and I had this in my paper, but kind of cut it for time, that we have so many job options and that sometimes we're not sure what we want to do. So I think it's, even if you don't know what you want to do, you should do something, but it's best to do what you think you might want to do.
Okay, do you think that, like, there's a better kind of job for teenagers? Like, do you think that a job working in a store or an office is just on the same level in terms of benefits as, like, working in a fast food restaurant, or do you think they're equal?
I think they can teach you different things, so I think they're just as valuable. I would, of course, you can look at how much money, that would probably be my deciding factor, because that's just how mine works. But also, I would just throw in the concern for safety, and sometimes, like, you hear about people at, like, McDonald's and stuff being robbed way more than you hear about Little Land in 90. So we do get gypsies every once in a while. That's very amusing. Does that answer your question?
This is kind of off of Lexi's question. Do you think that, As far as like, not just like putting it on your resume, but like experience carrying through to jobs that you might have later, do you think that there's like, it's all just kind of generic, or apart from doing a job that's in a specific field that you want to do you think that there are fields of the more general jobs that are better experienced for, I guess, career?
I think there definitely are, which I probably should have mentioned, there's kind of a mid-level between the specific things and very general things, like I learned about children's clothing and about being an employee. But there are also, some things that can sometimes carry over, like I've learned like the basics of running like a cash register. Of course, I don't intend to be running a cash register for the rest of my life. It might, the next little part-time job I get, because sometimes night is actually closing. All the grandmothers visit with that, if they know. And, that might be used in the next job. And like my sister spent her first summer that she worked doing like basic office work and that sort of thing can definitely carry over. And like I said, if you know what fields you want to go in more specifically, or somewhat generally, like Claire's done a lot of things with different sciences, then certainly kind of testing the waters and your general field can give you a better idea of specific fields. Is that your question? Yeah. Someone ask you a question, or he will. Ask you how.
Okay, I will. I want to go back to this issue of it seems to me that there are two primary arguments in this issue. One being the one you gave about the value of work early. The other one being typically more from a parent's perspective about what they want for their children. In that, not that, well, first of all, dismissing the idea that any parent, or maybe a thought that a parent would want to keep his child sheltered. That's out there, but let's dismiss that. I don't think that's legitimate. But let's say you've got a parent who says, I don't want to keep my child sheltered, but I also, you've got the rest of your life to work. You can get a job doing something when you are a little bit older, even if admittedly it might be a little harder to when you're 22 than when you're 16 to have that first job because you don't have any experience at a job yet. However, you can do things like focus on schoolwork, focus on extracurriculars that you will never in your entire life have another opportunity to have. And this is where parents who perhaps worked as teenagers, who maybe didn't have certain experiences, think, you know what, I'd rather you continue playing violin. I'd rather you continue pursuing a competitive sports league, or doing something that takes so much time that frankly you don't have time to work. And so I would like for you to comment a little bit more, because I think there's a valid argument there that frankly it's not that hard to go, if you're somewhat responsible, to go get a job doing something later in life. So why not put it off and instead pursue the kinds of things that you definitely will not be able to do once you're in your early 20s, in terms of camps, athletics, musical pursuits, those kinds of things, travel. Why not put it off for those things? Because couldn't you argue that those things give you some of the same kinds of ways through which you can mature?
First of all, I feel that some of those good things and some things you mentioned can possibly be done beyond high school. There's, community theater, and you can always do some sort of sports activity, even if it's like in a casual setting. But also that kind of, the reason I feel that you shouldn't wait to get a job is kind of similar to why you shouldn't put off homework until someone's supposed to check it. That it kind of, overall, I feel that it looks better to go with the slow and steady method of not working a lot when you're a teenager. Because of course, like I said, you do need time to relax and have fun, and extracurriculars are really great, and you can learn a lot from them. But I feel that just doing a little, getting involved with the adult world that we'll all, be a part of sooner than we might think is, I believe that it's a good idea. And of course, the concern for school activities and school is of course valid, which is why I again suggest that the teenager might find it easier to have a summer job and it doesn't have to be very time consuming, just a little something to give you a window into the adult world. That's
Trying to figure out.
you can ramble so you can figure it out.
Okay. So, I don't have time to have a job in the summer, but I could argue that I'm learning the same lessons by pursuing athletics to the degree that I am, to learn the same lessons as I would in a job. I mean, I've worked enough to make some money, so I do know how to manage money, and then my parents give me money for the summer that I have to take care of, and if I don't, then I have to call them and tell them I overdrew, which is $75 fee, which they're not happy about. So, I mean, I am learning how, I know how to balance a checkbook, I'm learning the same lessons. So, would you say that I actually still need a job?
I would say that in a way you kind of already have. You said you've been doing some things to earn money, so that gives you the experience with money, and I knew that you would be a problem in asking me a question, so I'm somewhat prepared for it. Well, yes, I added the professional athlete section to you in mind. Yeah, didn't have anyone in mind for the marriage section. Same. I feel that if you can do a little something, like I said, maybe coaching a group of 5-year-olds, something like that, which doesn't sound like fun, but probably wouldn't take, too much time. Of course, there are particular problems because you do sports all the time, and multiple sports. Perhaps if you just passed in one, it would be easier to find a chunk of time that you could devote to a more regular job. I think you've probably done enough with smaller, like I included stuff like babysitting and stuff in with regular jobs. So I think you've done enough to get into the work world, and you're going to go to Princeton anyway. So,
Amen.
for sports, not sports. So I think you've already filled the requirements for having a job, even if most of it isn't actually a job.
Catherine, could you comment on how you're having a job at a retail store? What does that do to you when you go shopping at Target or Walgreens or wherever you might go?
First of all, they're bad employees and they're bad customers. My personal opinion is that a employee should be aware of their customers and should offer to help them and just say hello and smile instead of huddling like with other employees and talking like you see sometimes. That bugs me. And also, I'm probably not supposed to be saying all these inventions, but also I've noticed when you do offer help, customers have a very precise reply, and it is almost always, like when you say, is there anything I can help you with? They say, no thank you, I'm just looking. It's kind of that kind of voice. It's a little bit creepy how they all say it. Creepy. They like script something. They all do. But I've learned to be attentive but not annoying. Really helpful, I guess. So just, you kind of learn to gauge people. Like if you think, like by what they first are drawn to, you kind of can learn how to help them better and also learn if they're trying to steal.
But how does it affect you as a shopper?
As a shopper?
Yeah.
I
When you're on
know
the
what
other end, when you're not at work.
I'm never going to say the words, no thank you, I'm just looking, really quickly and all together. find something else to say. I'm not sure what, because they probably all say it because it's what they want to say. But I'm gonna figure out something to say that's unique. And it's kind of, I guess it has made me a little bit cynical about less attentive employees at other stores sometimes. I mean, it's not like one store is better, it's that some employees are better. So it's probably made me a little cynical. But I think it's given me enough advantages to make up for that. And I think expecting excellence is never something to be ashamed of. That's okay.
Yes. On what you were saying about the employee interaction with the customer thing, like the what you said was the like generic response, no thanks for just looking. I know I've never worked in like a job. I've had a job that I do. I've never had like income and all that kind of stuff. But when I go into places, I use that term very often, like you said. As a customer, as a guy, person that shops at pretty good places, not the biggest shop in the world, but I tend to feel pretty comfortable in just asking somebody for help. So do you think, I know you as an employee probably have to be like helpful and pull it out and going, but to what extent do you have to listen to the person who's asking for help?
I think it kind of, you have to use your judgment in that too. If someone obviously looks by what they want to be left alone, well, one thing you might want to watch them because sometimes those are people who try to steal from you. But you have to be somewhat aware. But of course, if they obviously do want to be left alone, then of course you don't keep badgering them, you don't be annoying. And of course for shoppers like you, it's not really a problem if you're willing to ask for help. But some people, you'd be amazed how many people just like stand around, like we have a silver cabinet, just stand around looking at it and don't ask anyone if they can like see something or anything. They don't ask for help because no one's offered, I guess, which I didn't think would be such a problem before, just because it never occurred to me, because I would, find one of those Target people with the red shirts when I was there and, ask them. So I never had a problem asking for help, but some people do. Kind of need to be somewhat aware, and also make sure that.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Ken.